What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tack on One podcast. Today, I am joined by retired Marine Sergeant Major Pascal DeSillis. He's somebody who's very special to me. He was my company first sergeant with 3rd Battalion, 7th Marine with Lima Company. So, Pascal, sir, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm honored to be on your show. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. I'm very excited about this. I got lots of questions for you now that it's appropriate and we're not 4 ranks apart from each other, and I can actually have a conversation with you.
Right.
So how did you end up with 3-7?
So I was with 1-7 Charlie Company, just right across the street, and there was a first sergeant at Lima 3-7 who was not able to make the deployment. So they needed a full-up round or an individual who's prepared and ready to deploy. And we recently returned from a UDP deployment in Okinawa and pretty much didn't have my sea bags completely unpacked. So the sergeant major had asked who's ready, for deployment. And of course, all the first sergeants are raising their hand. So there's a little bit of rock, paper, scissors going on, and Sergeant Major said, "Tag, you're it."
Wow. So did you know, like 3-7 has kind of a reputation? Did you know what you were getting yourself into?
I didn't. And funny that you should ask. When I left Suicide Charlie, I know you know of, okay, 3 guidons
Oh,
or
yeah.
2 guidons. Well, anyway, because the Marines and Suicide Charlie, they know the reputation that the company holds, they do everything they can to not tarnish the name and reputation of the company. So I leave Suicide Charlie, Charlie Company 1-7. I just gonna call it, Suicide Charlie. And like my phone doesn't ring in the middle of the night when I leave, work, and it's just quiet. The Marines. Now I'm not saying the Marines are perfect. We know that, but they take care of they take care of each other. They just keep things quiet. It doesn't hit my radar. I get to Lima Company 3-7 and like my phone is ringing off the hook. I'm like, what is going on? So I pulled the staff NCOs and I was like, hey, look, I don't understand why every single night I got to get a phone call about, some Marines in trouble, some Marine this. One of the staff sergeants said to me, it's like, well, the Marines are going to be Marines. I was like, negative. No. I was like, I just left the company where my phone wasn't ringing the way it's ringing right now. So there's something that needs to change here. I said, you know what? I don't know. You remember me saying, my saying about the Kool-Aid, right? So I said, you know what? We just need to get everybody to be drinking on the same Kool-Aid. I said, regardless of what flavor Kool-Aid you drink, I got that big vat of Kool-Aid, dunk your cups in there, get a big healthy, serving of some Kool-Aid, whether it's the red Kool-Aid, the orange Kool-Aid. You remember, I like the purple Kool-Aid best.
I remember.
But little by little, the Marines started to get the buy-in. It's like, when a company has a reputation, it's not, the first sergeant, it's not the captain. When the battalion has a reputation, it's not the sergeant major, it's not the battalion commander, it's the Marines in the unit, and how do they want to conduct themselves. Little by little, you all started getting the buy-in. So I'm not saying you all were perfect like Charlie Company was, but you started to take care of each other. So I started getting way less phone calls.
Yeah, it's funny. I was on the East Coast prior to going to 3-7, and they handed out the wish list. And I had some friends from boot camp and SOI that were with 3-7. My brother-in-law was stationed in 29 Palms as an MP, and it was about 3.5 hours from my house. So I put 3-7 as my first choice. And the company gunny called me into his office, and he was like, "Hey, Marine, you're supposed to put your first choice on this line and then go down from there." And I said, "Gunny, that is my first choice." And he's like, "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." and he called a master sergeant in the office, and he was like, "Hey, this Marine decided he's going to put down 3-7 as his first choice." And they just bust out laughing. And, I didn't know at that time. And I was like, "Man, what's wrong with 3-7?" And
Right, right.
found out, but yeah, they thought it was funny, but it made the most sense to me. Like I said, if I was going to deploy, I was going to, I want my wife to be, 3 hours from home if she wanted to go home or have her brother on base with her. It just made the most sense. But yeah, I didn't know what I was getting myself into either, but
20
it worked
pounds,
out.
20 pounds, a special place.
It is. It is. Yeah, they were like, you can go to Pendleton, you can go other places. And I was like, no, I want 3.7s. Whatever. I got it. I was like the only crazy one who picked it. But and I'll never forget
Not a
too,
lot of
I was
people pick 29 pounds.
no, no. But you know, I in Arizona, like I said, my hometown was 3.5 hours. So, my wife was able to go
Got it.
home while I was employed, and it made sense for her comfort and my daughter at the time. So and it worked out. I don't regret it. 370 was a unique experience for sure, but it wasn't terrible.
Right.
I do remember I was checking in, and the very first time I met you, I'd gone through the whole check-in process, and nobody cared about my uniform. Like that whole night prior, I spent hours like making sure my alphas were squared away, because I had heard the stories about checking in, and I wanted to make a good first impression. And you were the last person I had to check in with. And I forget who it was. Somebody was guiding me through the company office. And he was like, all right, so you're going to go see First Sergeant DeSillis now. Like, just make sure you look good. I was like, all right, and then I had two other fast Marines with me that were checking in. And we walked in and we rounded the corner to the first sergeant's office right there. And you just had this big smile on your face. And you went to your desk and grabbed a ruler and you just started checking our uniforms. And I was like, this is how I was told check-in would be. But I remember you said, I'll give it to you fast Marines. You guys know how to look good. And, we passed our little inspection. I was like, but
Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, but, like that was the first time where I was like, okay, like this guy's fair, because, the Marine Corps games, you could have found something, I'm sure. And I'd been walking around in my alphas all day checking in. So I'm sure there was a wrinkle or a crease or something you could have picked up. But, I passed, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Were you always big on uniforms, or is that something you picked up along the way? Rank?
I would say yes, because as a younger Marine, I was one of those individuals that spent a lot of time getting my uniforms prepared for meritorious promotions. And if you're going to go on a meritorious board, you have to go through a litany of uniform inspections and whatnot. So I've kind of always been a stickler for the uniform. And then fast forward, to my time spent on the drill field. You're always inspecting uniforms. Fast forward some more, spend some time at the academy teaching the sergeants. And I had a choice of which course, I wanted to teach. And I was like, definitely I want to make the greatest impact. And that's, with the sergeants, because I don't know if you know the term, you can't teach a gunny anything. And the staff sergeants, they're kind of like in limbo. They don't know where they, just some of them are still eating Sergeant Chow, and the other ones are right about, the cusp of, pinning on gunnery sergeant. So there's kind of that void. But, when you get a hold of a sergeant and you make an impact, on their lives, that's the true future, of the Marine Corps. So I went to the sergeant's course and lots of, uniform inspections there and, mess nights and so on and so forth, and making sure everybody's uniform. So yeah, I've always been a stickler for the uniforms.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's funny you brought up the Kool-Aid thing because I was going to bring that up too. And now I know the meaning behind it, but I used to, when you give those little speeches or, we'd be in formation, you're talking about drinking the Kool-Aid, that was something I looked up to as well because it was like, you kind of leveled with us and told us, you don't need to know everything that I know. A lot of things are in play behind the scenes and you just need to drink the Kool-Aid and do your part. And I think that hit home for a lot of us because, it can be frustrating not knowing what's going on. And, Marines want to know everything and be in charge of everything and have control. And sometimes, we best that we don't know, especially a group of
Yeah.
3-7.
Yeah, it's I tell you what, I've sat in on briefs as a sergeant major, and I've left a brief saying, "Man, I wish I wasn't read in or man, I wish I didn't know what I know right now. So yeah, that's a very true statement, regardless of where you're at, in rank. Sometimes
Yeah.
you're better off not knowing.
So something else too that I want to point out was you always, I mean, through the whole workup. So I checked in early. I had leave for, PCS, but I wanted to make sure I got the full workup. So I checked in early to make sure I could go through Mojave Viper and all that stuff and, get to know my squad and my team, my Marines that I was going to deploy with, and also, have that training beforehand. But you were right there with us like all the time. You were on the hikes, you were in all the trainings. Other staff NCOs would, kind of disappear, do their own thing, but you were right there with us the whole time, always training. I think you did like a fantastic job of maintaining like good order and discipline with the company, but also, showing that you were one of us too. And I think that hit for a lot of us too. Like I said, you could have disappeared with all the other staff NCOs and done your own thing, but for whatever reason, you wanted to be there, right there with us.
So something that I think there was maybe a handful of Marines, they knew, and it was definitely one of the Humvee drivers, or yeah, the drivers. Because for me, it was always important, to lead from the front and lead by example, and not be one of those staff NCOs that just use his staff NCO privilege and go off and being comfortable while the Marines are being miserable. But as a first sergeant, it's very administrative heavy and, intensive. So once we were done with all our training at Mojave Viper and it was dark, I would get in a Humvee, drive all the way to main side, because just because we are, in the field doesn't mean that the battalion doesn't have deliverables. So, I'd hop on, the computer, read all the emails, answer uh, the actionable emails, send this roster that the sergeant major needed, this package that, a Marine is going to get promoted, or, that had to be submitted. So all the admin stuff, gets done. Whoever the driver was literally just sleeping in the company office on the floor. And when I was done with all the admin stuff, I'm like, all right, hey, you ready to go? And there's been a few times where the Marine, like, he just woke up so groggy. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm awake. I'm not tired. So I'll just go ahead and drive back. And I'm not supposed to be driving, the Humvee as a first arm, but, it's after midnight. I'm not going to get into an accident. Marine gets into the Humvee and he's out cold. And we come through the gate and you see the individual kind of look in the mirror like, is that the... I was like, don't ask any questions. I first arm, park the
Yeah.
Humvee and, climb in the hooch and get up, the next day and do it all over again.
Yeah, I do remember at Camp Wilson during EMV, you were constantly calling in the staff NCOs for meetings and stuff. And, we actually, as the NCOs, were starting to feel bad for the staff NCOs because they would get, just nice and comfortable in their racks. And then all of a sudden we'd hear you yelling, staff NCOs. We'd all have to repeat it. Yeah. And we were like, oh man, like staff sergeant's not getting any sleep. He's going to be grumpy tomorrow.
What platoon were you in?
So I originally started with first platoon, so Staff Sergeant Dix,
Dix. Yeah.
which
And
awesome leader as well.
okay, so you deployed with Staff Sergeant Dix?
So I made it to Leatherneck. I was a part of the Advon party, and then we broke out into the Misfits. So we did the mobile section, and
So you got attached to the battalion?
yeah, so at Jackson, and it was myself and Stanfield who were leading Misfits. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember that.
Yeah.
So, which was kind of cool. Because we were all just kind of like a bunch of NCOs pulled from all the platoons and stuck together in some mishmash misfit squad. So
Yeah.
it was a fun experience, and I had a good time.
Yeah.
That's interesting though that you talk about like the behind the scenes. Even after a long work day of training and stuff, you still had to go back and do administrative work. I guess that's a portion we didn't see. But when did you sleep?
You know, I guess the drill field prepared me, to function with a small amount of sleep. And I'd say the whole time, every time we would be out in the field, I would average about 4 hours asleep, a night.
So you were on the drill field before going to 37?
Oh yes, yes, yes. I was
Oh, wow.
a drill instructor as a staff sergeant. So I was,
Wow.
years before, 37. Yeah.
Wow. I would not guess that by your style of leadership and how compassionate you were towards us. I mean, you
Yeah.
had a switch. We knew not to flip it.
Yeah. 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 Um, the saying, treat others as, you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was a very young, impressionable Marine, I've had staff NCOs just, come at me sideways just because they were a staff NCO, and I never got it, and I didn't like it. So everything that I grew up not liking, I tried my best not to emulate that style of leadership. And I've run across a lot of phenomenal leaders in the Marines that I've had peers going through the Staff NCO Academy. And these are staff sergeants just like me. And I'm like having conversations with them. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like, I wish I had the same leaders you had, coming up, because they're just oozing of leadership. Most of my leadership style, honestly, is leaders I did not aspire to be like. I said, I don't want to be like that guy. I don't want to be like that guy. Instead of having these, extremely motivational staff NCOs, for me, it was the opposite. It's like, okay, this is how I don't want to be. And I guess I was fortunate enough or mature enough to know the difference. I'll tell you this. I had a Sergeant Major Roberts when I was a sergeant on my first enlistment. And I think I told you in the beginning that I spent a lot of time preparing for meritorious promotions. So in my very first unit, they called me Teflon D. So like nothing can stick to me because I was like the golden child of the unit. Every meritorious promotion I went up for, I won. And every Marine that I prepared for meritorious promotion, they won. So I was the golden child. I'm not like bragging. It's a fact. So when I'm getting ready to end my enlistment, Sergeant Major, calls me, and this is before days of career planners and whatnot. It was always the Sergeant Major that would talk to the Marines about, what's their next step. So he calls me to the office, hey, so you got about, a little less than a year left on your contract. What are your plans? And I'm sure he thought, I was like, oh, hoorah, hoorah, yeah, I'm going to re-enlist. I was like, I'm getting out of the Marine Corps. And he's like, say what? He's like, hey, come to my office. And he sits me down. He's like, well, what's you getting out? Like, I can't stand the Marine Corps. It's like, it's not what I signed up for. He's like, well, why? So I gave him a laundry list, of issues that I was having. And he never interrupted me. He just, wrote, take notes. And when I hit that moment to excel, I couldn't talk anymore. I was completely, winded. He says to me, he's like, you know what I hear, Sergeant DeSillis? I hear somebody that, passionate and loves the Marine Corps. So I kind of like, give him this look, and he goes, based on that look that you're giving me, you probably think that I didn't hear a word you just said. And I was like, that's so funny, Sergeant Major. That's exactly what I was thinking. That you weren't listening to anything I was saying the whole time. He says, everything, all the issues that you have with the quote unquote Marine Corps, they're all valid, but it's not the Marine Corps that you have an issue with. It's your leaders. I said, and there's a lot of things going on in the unit that I was unaware of. I said, and you now made me aware of. As your Sergeant Major, I'm going to fix that. He says to me, it's like, look, I can't force you to stay in. I can't make you stay in, but I hope that, you change your mind. I don't want you to sit back and watch me make changes that I should have been making a long time ago. So like the first thing that, he did was he called all the staff NCOs up, and he goes, I want to have a uniform inspection in alphas. Well, half the staff NCOs couldn't fit in their alphas, so they had to bring them on a hanger. He put me in charge of the PT program, and I had a whole bunch of staff NCOs in the PT program, and I was a sergeant. So I saw that he was invoking change. So he wasn't just giving me lip service. That was the one, I'd say, staff NCO that had a huge impact, on me. When you're talking about leadership, and he said, and I don't know if I've ever shared this, with you all, but I've shared it with Marines. He says, as a sergeant major, when I throw my rock into the lake, no, he says, Sergeant DeSillis, when you throw your rock in the lake, your ripples, just go but so far. When I throw my boulder in the lake, my ripples go clear across to the other side of the lake. He said, do the Marine Corps service and stick around so that with each rank that you gain, your ripples are going to go further and further. You have the right mindset. You just don't have enough rank to make as big of an impact. There's Marines younger than you or more impressionable than you who are going to see those staff NCOs and they're going to think that's what right looks like, and they're going to emulate that. I need you to be that thick grass that's going to choke out those weeds, and you're going to do that as you, mature in the Marine Corps. And I thought about it, and what he said, had some lasting impact, obviously.
Wow. Yeah, that's heck of a speech. I mean, how are you supposed to get out after that?
Well, I mean, it wasn't that speech that made me get out. It was watching his actions and the changes that he made in the staff NCOs. It did make me realize that it wasn't the Marine Corps that I had an issue with. It was my staff NCOs. It was the leaders. And that was one of those things that stuck with me. And it's like, I don't want to be the reason why a Marine is going to get out of the Marine Corps because I was a poor leader.
Wow.
Long story short, that's what I should have, gotten to.
I had some fantastic leaders. I think 3-7 had some very exceptional staff NCOs. We had some pretty good leadership, but prior to that, I had some NCOs and staff NCOs who were not so great. I mean, they weren't terrible, but, same as you, I was picking out things that when I thought, okay, when I become an NCO, I'm never going to be like that. When I become a staff NCO, I'm never going to be like that. I would always think about those things. And I think that's why, when I met you and I continued to watch you and how you led the company, how you led the staff NCOs, I was like, okay, there's something different about this guy. And, like just now, I was surprised that you were on the drill field prior to, because like I said, you had a switch and we knew not to flip it, and we did a few times, but, I just saw a different side of leadership from you that I was like, okay, I want to be like that guy. I want to lead like him, and I want people to trust me like we trust him. So, I'm glad that Sergeant Major had a talk with you and we ended up 3-7 together. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, through the whole workup, like I said, you were right there with us. And now I find out that you're leaving at night and going to do even more work, which is insane. And then we get to the deployment and it was no different. It was like as soon as we got off the plane, it was straight to work. I don't even think I was in Sangin for maybe 2 or 3 hours before we went on the first patrol. And throughout that whole deployment, I mean, you were hopping in, going on patrols with us. I remember one night we had spent all day out doing patrols, and we were so exhausted. And Misfits, we had got a bunch of food together, and we were cooking a bunch of food behind the hab. And Jackson starts taking fire, and we're like, no. Like, we're just trying to ignore it. We're trying to cook our food so we can eat real quick. And you kick open the door to the COC and you're in your skivvy shorts, boots, Kevlar, and vest. And you're like, I don't know about you boys, but I'm going to get some. And then he just took off running into the darkness. And we were like, dang it, we can't let him go by himself. So we all picked our rifles and followed you. But I was like, man, this guy, like, he never stops.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that or not, but we were just, man, we wanted to eat so bad. We were tired and hungry, and you were like, nope, let's go. Because we were thinking, we were like, oh, the post got it. They're fine.
No. I mean, if our guys are out there, we got to make sure we support them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we were all just like, dang it, first sergeant. All right, we can't
Yeah,
let him go by himself.
yeah, yeah. I think I went out a couple of times with y'all, and I rem I remember also. You remember me telling you, me hopping in a vehicle and driving when I shouldn't have been driving at 29 Palms. I think I did the same thing in Afghanistan, driving out and making sure that the door, the hatch was shut so that the gate guard, checking us in. And I don't know if you were on this one mission with Misfits, who was going out, and the XO, he stops us going out the gate. And I was just like, my God, I'm behind the driver's seat, because I used that as a way to give you all some rest. And so if I can take one individual's position, that can give, one individual a little bit more rest, to recuperate in a combat environment. Obviously, I'm not supposed to be driving, in country. The XO stops to talk to, I want to say it was Stansfield's, the lead Vic, and I was in the Vic, vehicle number 2. And I was just like, no, please don't come check all these vehicles. And you're like, what the hell are you doing, in the driver's seat? Obviously, he didn't stop and check all the vehicles, and we just kind of, went out. But that was the last time I got behind, the wheel while we were out, on deployment. I did, give individuals
Yeah,
some rest, but I wasn't the individual behind the wheel anymore.
yeah, yeah. I remember you did that a couple times, and
Yeah.
I think it was Rowe or Stanfield. Somebody was like, "Hey, first sergeant wants to drive." I was like, "Well, he's the first sergeant.
Yeah.
Let him do whatever he wants." Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you went out with us quite a bit actually, and you randomly like we'd be packing up and about to head out on patrol, and you'd be like, "Hold up, let me grab my stuff. I'm gonna hop in."
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. You
yeah,
got room for
yeah,
one more?
yeah, yeah. You go out with us all the time, and I remember, so, getting into the story, that I talked to you about, and I teach in my leadership classes, and it's kind of weird how it came about. The first time I told the story, I was leading a veterans group at the place I worked. I just, everybody was sharing these war stories about, having a good leader, and yeah, it was Army guys, Marines, and I ended up telling the story about, Christmas Day after, you know, second platoon had the IED strike, and you and I got separated together. And I told that story, and everybody was like, "Wow!" And it had a real impact on that group. And then I got put in charge when I went to the police academy. They put me as like the guide or distinguished recruit, whatever they called it. So I was basically leading the class as a recruit in the police academy, and we were struggling to come together as a team. A lot of guys, there was a couple other prior service guys who were in there, and we were doing the best we could to kind of motivate these young kids who are just 21 years old, and you know, this is the first rough thing they've ever been through. So the recruit training officers pulled me in one day, and they said, "Hey, you got to steer the ship, and you got to motivate these guys to come together as a team." And I thought about it all day, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say to these kids. Like I don't know what to say to motivate them. And so I just started talking about leadership, and then I rolled into the first Sergeant Basilis story, and it had an impact on them too. And I was like, okay, maybe this is my motivational speech from now on. So, and then as I continued to teach and do leadership classes and stuff, I started to implement that story, and for the most part, I'd say like 90% of the time, everybody gets it. And then there's 10% of the people who are like, what are you talking about? But so we had a pretty rough deployment when it comes to IEDs. Like at this point, towards the holidays, I think we really picked up October, November. We started to have a lot more IED strikes and a lot more weird stuff happen. And I remember Christmas Day, second platoon had a Marine step on an IED, and it was close to dark. So we were misfits. We were heading over there to, help with the CAS evac and everything. And the decision was made that second platoon, that patrol was going to stay on the blast site overnight to make sure none of the gear got stolen or anything. And, uh, and then we would do the post blast assessment in the morning. So I remember bright and early, the sun had barely come up, and we were getting the vehicles ready, and we were heading over there. And it was one of the times where you yelled at us to stop, and you hopped in, and you said you were going with us.
Yep.
Um, and I guess I'll tell my side of it first, and then I'm curious to see your side for the first time. So we got in the vehicles, and we didn't know how the Marine was doing at this point, so we were all quiet, and none of us were looking forward to what we were going to do that day. And I remember we showed up, and it was cold. It was like very crisp, cold morning, and we had EOD with us, the EOD team, and they just started pulling IEDs out of the ground, secondaries, and things. I remember they pulled one of the mines out of the ground that had no metal signature on it. And I remember looking down at my feet, thinking, man, I hope I don't step on one of these things. And I think we were all thinking the same thing. And it was a terrible setup, like where it was a perfect choke point for the Taliban to put an IED. It made perfect sense to, why there was an IED there. And like I said, EOD was out there just, there's one, there's one, there's one. And they were just taking them up everywhere. And EOD, and I can't remember who else was outside of the vehicles, because we still had guys who were watching, who had Overwatch on the turrets and stuff, the vehicles for us. And you and I end up getting split up from everybody else. And I remember like we just kept looking at each other, checking on each other. And I kept thinking, I knew what task was coming next. And we had the bags, and you and I were tasked with picking up what was left of the Marine and all the gear. And I remember the corpsman gave us just purple latex gloves, and we put them on, and we just started getting to work. We started picking up what was left. And I remember again being I wasn't scared, but I was like, man, this is probably going to be the day I step on an IED and I'm out here. It was real. It was real for me at that point. Like I knew it was a bad area. We were in a bad spot. There was IEDs everywhere. And you and I just got to work and started picking up pieces. And we kept looking at each other. And I remember your face at one point when you looked at me, and I could tell you were feeling the same exact thing I was feeling. Like we did not want to be doing what we were doing. And at that moment, you like took a big breath, and then you said, "Hey, where did you grow up?" And I said, "Arizona, First Sergeant." And you were like, "Oh, okay. I grew up in California, and I grew up riding dirt bikes. You ever think about how cool it would be to have a dirt bike out here and to be riding around on these hills and stuff?" And I knew what you were doing, taking my mind off of what was going on. And we just carried on this conversation about dirt bikes and where we grew up. And to me, that was like the moment. Prior to that, obviously, I knew, what kind of leader you were. But at that moment, I was like, this guy's 4 ranks above me. He could just be, the hard charging first sergeant and say, "Hey, this is the job, do it. Don't complain." But instead, you got down on my level, and you guided me through that whole day and made sure I was good. In a terrible situation, I think at one point we were laughing and joking, and at that moment, like it meant the world to me. Take my mind off of what was going on. It was a terrible situation. We were all, like I said, IEDs were, we were getting IED strikes all the time at this point. So I guess, do you remember that the same way I do?
So I remember that day, but obviously everybody's experience there is going to be different. I don't know if you remember me telling you all before we left. That's like, everybody's coming home, right? And then and then when we came back, I said, everybody, came home. You may have lost, a limb, but everybody came back. And like when I said everybody's coming home, I just knew there was no way I would have, control over that. I guess my fear of losing a Marine was greater than anything else. So I never worried about triggering an IED when I was in country. When I would go on a foot patrol with any one of the platoons, they would always put me in caboose. So I was always the last man. And I would spend 85% of that patrol walking backwards. I always had this fear that while we was going to be on a patrol, somebody was going to peek over a wall and catch us slipping. So that's why I spent a lot of time walking backwards to catch somebody who would be peeking over a wall to trigger an IED as we walked by, or to see if I would see a glint from a scope or something like that, watching us walking the opposite direction. Now, part of it was knowing that there's Marines in front of me doing their job, sweeping and all this other stuff. But you know how one Marine can step over it and another Marine trigger it. I put my life in God's hands, the entire deployment. And there was never a fear that I was going to trigger an IED. That day, I remember it being real cold. I remember it being really, really quiet, eerily quiet. And when I was looking at you and I changed the subject, what I wanted to do was do my best to keep you from absorbing as much of that scene as possible. And I remember saying, I'm going to take, this Marine's leg off the battlefield so that somebody else didn't have to carry, his leg off the battlefield and have to remember that moment of the deployment. Me talking about, motorcycles and other things. Yeah, that was definitely a moment where I can see that, you were starting to get that 1,000-yard stare. So I was just like, okay, I just need to, get him to think about, something else other than, the task at hand. So,
Yeah. Well, it worked too. And I mean, I remember, like, I can picture it very vividly, the first piece I picked up. And I remember thinking, like, all right, it was kind of a weird thought, but I was like, just think it's meat. You're just picking up meat. And I was putting it in the bag and grabbing on the gear. And I think after that moment, though, like I said, I had already observed what kind of leader you were at that point, and that was just like that solidified everything. What kind of person you were, not just leader. The rest of the deployment, we catch each other, in crossing, on the way to the head or something. We fist bump each other or something. It's like, it was again. You were 4 ranks above me. You didn't have to do that, and like I said, it meant the world to me. Just first sergeant's a human, and first sergeant cares about me and wanted to, help me the best I could. He definitely did that. So, thank you. Obviously, I greatly appreciate it. But, and I think what really made that situation worse was that it was like the day after Christmas. None of us wanted to be there. We wanted to be home. And like you said, it was cold and it was like creepy quiet that day. You could hear everything for miles and it was,
miles.
yeah, it was a very weird day. And like I said, we've been through quite a bit at that point, but that one kind of hit home, I think, because of the day. It was just the day after Christmas, and we had just got done opening our care packages from our families, and we did like a little Christmas dinner and stuff like that. Of all days for a Marine to step on an IED, Christmas Day. It's just kind of a rough situation. And I think not knowing how he was doing at that point, like, made it worse. Obviously, he recovered. He's good to go now, and he's doing things. At that point, we didn't know, and we were all worried about him, worried about each other. I think I'm pretty sure the company commander, Captain Chisholm, was out there with us, and he had wandered off with DOD. So, I was worried about where are they going, and why are there only 3 Marines together? And I was worrying about a lot of stuff. But and then you and I just somehow got split up and put in that situation. But it was a rough one.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the rest of the deployment, It was like we had a connection, and you were constantly checking in on me. I remember you coming in on the hab, and just sit down and chat with us sometimes. At that point, we were like, "Are we in trouble, or what do we do?" But
Yeah.
I think that was just the kind of leader you were. You wanted to
I
be
just,
with the
yeah,
boys.
um, you, do you remember how I would say, look, I use the term kid a lot, but I don't recognize any of you as children, but because of my age, not just rank, but my age, I was old enough to be, all of your fathers, and I spent more time with you all than I did my actual children. So my whole time in the Marine Corps, I just loved being around, the Marines and leading and, inspiring the Marines. For me, it was always the high point is just being around the Marines. Some individuals, they would put F on their fitness report, to pick, first sergeant so they can get promoted, faster. And then, you have those individuals that they get promoted to sergeant major, and their concern is moving up the ladder of, being a sergeant major so they can work for a colonel, so they can work for a general. I never aspired, to work for a colonel or a general, because once you get to those levels, you're away from the Marines. You no longer have Marines, you have staff, and the individuals you're talking with are other sergeants major or first sergeants, and you just away from the troops. And I just always loved being around the Marines. You made my day.
Yeah, it definitely shows. I remember after the deployment too, we went Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps Barrett came to do the dining out with us in Vegas, and you were right there at the door greeting all the Marines coming in. You were standing at the door, shaking hands, giving hugs. And, just it was cool because I had my wife with me and I got to introduce her to you and I tell her, hey, this is the guy I was telling you about. Yeah, it just all the way through the whole time I was with 37, and when you were with 37, that's just how you were. You were there with us, and I think you were around us more than you were the staff NCOs or higher ups. If you could
For
avoid it,
sure. For sure. But I'll tell you this, though. I communicate with the staff NCOs from that deployment every day.
uh,
Dix, Wurgis, Gunny Beagle. And I don't know if you remember Birch. He was
yeah,
third platoon.
yep,
Yeah. Um, so, he's still part of the group chat, in spirit. But yeah,
yeah,
we chat every day. Not a day goes by where we don't connect. So yeah, we're
that's a
still
good
really,
group.
really close.
Yeah, that's a good group. Make sure you send my love to them because
Yeah,
love
I
all those
definitely
guys.
will. Yeah. You send me
Yeah,
the the link to the podcast, I'll share it with them so that, they can see that you're doing great things.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Love to have him on too. Gunny Beagle was another one that was huge on that deployment.
Yes.
And he
Yeah.
kept us all in good spirits. He's just a funny guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a good group.
Everybody had, their unique quirks. And what I remember about another memorable moment is Staff Sergeant Wurgis at the time, the COC. I don't know if you were in the COC when the strike came in. The lieutenants that was on the radio, they're they're freaking out because it was our first major strike, and Staff Sergeant Wurgis was on the radio. The lieutenant, he's 10 octaves high, is talking really fast. And the Staff Sergeant Wurgis on on the other end, quiet, smooth, concise, and his tone on the radio de-escalated the COC on our end, just being clear, concise, giving the information that was needed. And this was his Marine. If anybody should have been, excited, it would have been, Staff Sergeant Wurgis, who was on ground zero. And he was able to, calm the COC down so that they weren't freaking out and they could, spool up the 9 line and do what they needed to do and not freak out. So
Yeah.
I was
So
we were definitely blessed to have some great staff NCOs.
yeah, that's what I was saying, the staff NCOs with 37 were exceptional. And fantastic leaders. But we were actually on a patrol when the 9 line started coming out. And I can remember vividly, like turning the radio up as high as it would go, telling everyone to shut up so we could hear what was going on. And our initial reaction was, we're going to drop everything we're doing and we're going to head that way. I can't remember who canceled us or how the decision was made for us to head back, but I do remember Staff Sergeant Word just being very calm on the radio. And I do recall that somebody like walked on him on the radio and he very calmly said, you know, break, break, break. I'm trying to get a 9 line out right now. And yeah, flawlessly executed that 9 line and got the CAS back. And yeah, he's definitely a awesome leader. All of them were, to be honest, you know, and you
Yeah.
know, it's when I heard about Hodge too, that just broke my heart because he was another one that kind of led me. He would pull me aside and kind of lead me as I was a newer NCO, and you know, he was kind of leading me in the right direction. So all those guys, you know, had a huge impact on me, and I'll never forget them. Especially, you know, all the staff NCOs. We had good NCOs too that, you know, were in the ranks of 3-7.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, we were. I mean, we were the best at what we were doing over there. That's for sure. But that's great. I still have group text that we've had for ever since we got out in 2012 or 13, with a couple guys that were with Fast and then joined me in 3-7, and it's been the longest running group chat I think we've ever had, and we talk to each other almost daily. So it's good. I think that's important too. You know, check in with each other and keep
Oh, yeah.
each other.
Yes.
So your group's
Yeah.
pretty big.
Yeah. I don't know what I would do without that group. I kid you not. That's definitely the group that keeps me together and going every day. No doubt.
And I think that's like a misconception that junior Marines have, is that you guys are impenetrable and, you know, nothing affects you guys because you walk around and you're very good at what you do at, you know, making sure that you put on the, you know, the Marine mentality of keeping everybody motivated, keeping everybody moving forward. So I think that was something that kind of hit me a few years after I got out and talked to some other people who were staff NCOs or higher. And, you know, they were just as affected by what happened as we were. You guys were just better at keeping it in at that point to keep us moving. I actually, when I was a cop, I got a call one time, and it was this guy. He was having kind of a mental breakdown, and his wife was very, very worried about him. And I showed up, and he had Marine Corps stuff everywhere, all over his house. And then when I walked into his bedroom to talk to him, had Sergeant Major rank everywhere. And I was like, okay, now I know how to talk to this guy and calm him down, you know. So we started talking about the Marine Corps, and come to find out he had just retired and just could not handle civilian life, and, you know, was losing it. And he ended up giving me a hug, and, you know, we got him some help. And, you know, that was big for me, like, to see, because I think we all struggle when we get out. This is a completely different world. I mean, even my wife, she went through the whole Marine Corps with me, and when we got out, she had a panic attack at how people acted and, you know, how different it was. 'Cause she was very involved on base. Like, she was part of lean stuff, you know,
Right.
so she was very, very, you know, she knew, like, tuck your shirt in, wear belts, you know, and then we go to Walmart after we get out, and she has a panic attack about, you know, how people are acting and looking, and, you know, it's a totally different world.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Do
Yeah.
you, I mean, I couldn't imagine doing as much time in the Marine Corps as you had, and just being thrown out into the civilian world. Like, what do you do to keep yourself from yelling at people for touching their face or stepping on the grass?
So for me, I've had a unique ability to separate Marine Corps and non-Marine Corps. I'll give you an example. When I was a drill instructor on a drill field, we'll say a friend of mine, you know, who's not a drill instructor, he just happens to be on the base to buy razors or something. And he was like, hey, DeSillas, how you doing? How you liking, the drill field? And then, we're, shooting the stuff. And here comes a recruit walking by and doesn't acknowledge the two of us, and, we're staff NCOs. I'm like, hey, hold on a second. And up one side, down the other, you understand that? And then, get away and the recruit, is gone. And I turn right back to having a conversation like I'm having a conversation with you. And the individual's like, what just happened? And I was like, he walked by and didn't give us the greeting of the day, and he knows better. So, I had to make a correction. And then, back to the task at hand, hey, so, and, carrying on conversation. And then another thing, again, like I said before, for every rank that, I gained, that just gave me more ability to support the Marines. It was never like my rank. It was always about the Marines. I wasn't one of those individuals like, look at me, hey, I'm a sergeant major. I'm important. I never felt that way. I was, always, humble. And you know how you say that, I'd walk by and, I was always at your level. Well, that was basically my superpower. I would treat every Marine as a peer, as an equal. I never treated individuals as a rank, whether you were below me or you were above me. Everybody, were equal. And I would tell Marines, it's like, always give me the ability to treat you with dignity and respect. I will never treat you like a rank. If I have to treat you less than, you're not going to like it. It's like, I call it, my Incredible Hulk syndrome, because, I want to treat, Marines, with kindness, with dignity, respect, and, like a human being, not like a Marine, so to speak. And when somebody would step outside the box and mistaken kindness for weakness, and, I had to make that correction, as I'm correcting the individual, I'm getting more and more upset that I'm upset. So it would just keep spooling and spooling and spooling. And I would say things that, you can never take back. And I didn't like it. I didn't like who I was becoming. It was never a good feeling to see another grown man cry, let's put it that way. And I didn't, that was not something that I enjoyed doing, but it just I would kind of spiral out of control. But I would spiral out of control because, like, why didn't you allow me to just treat you kindly? Why, did you take me to the point where I'm talking to you the way I'm talking to you, and have like an out of body experience, so to speak, Yeah,
I've had some pretty good ass chewings in the Marine Corps. I remember one in Afghanistan, and Gunny Beagle chewed my ass, and it wasn't even my ass chewing, but I wasn't going to speak up and say that, I wasn't going to throw somebody else under the bus. And I remember leaving that ass chewing like, man, that wasn't even for me. And I feel like disappointed in myself.
right, right.
He was on that level too of, he was just somebody you didn't want to disappoint, just like you. Like, I wanted to do the best I could every day just so I didn't disappoint you guys. And that was it. I can only imagine what you were like as a drill instructor. And I'm sure you were terrified.
So, like you said, I have a switch. My biggest fear going to the drill field was, you've probably seen, like, the majority of the time I've been smiling, and, I'm a smiler. I'm always smiling. It's like, man, how am I going to go to the drill field and, having a happy-go-lucky disposition on life? It's like, man, that's counterproductive. The thing is, recruits, when you're spending hours on your feet, away from your family, making all the sacrifices that you're making, and a recruit step out of line or not do what you tell them to do, switch goes off. It's not hard to be a drill instructor. I can just tell you that, just flipping that switch. And I would tell recruits, it's like, whatever the amount of recruits on the squad bay was, like, every single one of you is a stress reliever. So if I go home and my wife doesn't give me none, the night before, I'm going to take it out on you. If I'm driving to work, and I get pulled over and get a ticket, I'm gonna take it out on you. So whatever stress I have, for that day, it's gonna be gone because of you. Yeah. So
So what was your favorite rank in the Marine Corps? I mean, you tried them all out, so
hands down, my two favorite ranks was sergeant and gunnery sergeant.
really,
Yeah, as a sergeant, that's that last, NCO rank. You're like the top of the junior rank, so to speak. It's the one that you first really start to lead Marines. And staff NCOs start talking to you just a little bit differently. Well, in infantry, once you're a corporal, I mean, everything changes. But, I grew up in aviation, so it doesn't really change or start to change much until you're like a sergeant. Corporal, you're still on that cusp between lance corporal and sergeant, so there's a lot of lance corporals and a lot of corporals. So if you need a working party and there's not a whole lot of lance corporals, around, well, hey, corporal, go join that working party. Where the infantry, there's a ton of lance corporals, a handful of corporals, and even less than that, sergeants and staff NCOs. So it was just a different dynamic. And then gunnery sergeant, like the buck stops at the gunny. When a gunny says something, it doesn't matter who they're talking to, whether it's a general, a lance corporal, everybody pays attention to what the gunny's saying. Always. Yeah, when I picked up gunnery sergeant, it's like if I didn't pick up another rank, I'd have been just fine. And then when I
oh
picked
yeah,
up, first sergeant, that was a gift. And I was like, man, getting to lead, Marines. And that's when I left the aviation and I went to the infantry. So that was my first interaction, with the infantry when I went to Charlie 17. It was a different world, aviation and ground. It's like two totally different Marine Corps. And it was just like breathing fresh air for the first time. It's like, now this is what, I've always envisioned the Marine Corps to be like, when you're talking rank structure and respect and, just not that, infantry was perfect, but it was very close to a perfect Marine Corps um, that I envisioned.
oh yeah, yeah. So for me, like you said, being in the infantry, picking up corporal for me was like everything changed. People started to talk to me different, and I enjoyed corporal. That was probably my favorite rank. I mean, I only made it to sergeant, but
No, you
corporal
didn't
was,
only make it to sergeant.
well, with your help, I made it to sergeant.
Nah, 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 nah. You earned that on your own. Yeah.
Well, when I picked up corporal, it was I'm huge into learning. I still, I'm in college. I go to all the
Nice.
trainings I can. I'm constantly learning. So I think corporal for me was that moment where like it kicked into gear. Now it's time to start learning a whole new side to the Marine Corps and a whole new side to leadership. So I had a lot of fun as a corporal, and you know I picked up corporal at the perfect time just prior to going to 3-7. So when I got to 3-7, like I said, I had Birch, I had Dix, I had Wurgis, I had you, I had Gunny Beagle, who were all like developing me into being an NCO. And I mean, I couldn't ask for a better group of people to do that for me. So, I had a great time as a corporal, and then I picked up sergeant, and it was like, it's just one more stripe on top of corporal, and I get in trouble for a little bit more now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a good time, and I'm very fortunate to have had the leaders I had in 3-7. It completely changed my life, and I'm successful now doing everything that I do, and I give all the credit to you guys that helped me grow the way I did. Is in the fast company and the fast platoons, it's different. I mean, it's still the infantry. You go on deployments, and there's still it's a lot of training and a lot of great training. I'm not downplaying it all, but when you get to an infantry unit and you put all that training and that leadership to work, and you watch it all unfold on the battlefield, that's a whole different experience. Totally, totally different. I couldn't imagine going from aviation to, you know, then, hitting the ground with us. Well, I mean, 1-7, I'm sure was pretty much, I mean, not the same. 3-7's unique, but I think 1-7 probably for you was like introductory, wasn't it?
Yes. So I would say 1-7 has a different special place in my heart because it was my first infantry unit. And I guess I was fortunate enough to my first infantry unit being one that's so deep, you know, in history. Um, so being part of, 1-7, Charlie companies, it was my first infantry battalion. It was my first company as a first sergeant. That's where I cut my teeth. I learned a lot, but going over, to you all in Lima, uh, taking Marines to combat and bringing them back, you're changed forever. That is, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
couldn't imagine.
it's different.
I remember my wife and I, we were sitting on I forget what they call it, but the little baseball field in 29 Palms before you get on the bus to deploy. Staff Sergeant Dix and then another staff NCO, because I was with the Advon party. I had like 19 Marines that were coming with me on the plane, and they handed me the manifest and all this stuff about all the equipment that was coming with us on this flight. And I mean, I was barely 21 years old, and my wife was like, I can't believe the amount of stuff you're trusted with right now at your age. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. But the Marine Corps makes you grow up quick, makes you mature quick.
That's a big difference between the Marine Corps and all the other branches. From the time, you all corporals, Marines, the Marine Corps entrust NCOs implicitly. It's like, NCO, corporal, sergeant, whatever we need, X, Y, and Z, and that's it. There's no hand holding, there's no micromanaging. Where the other branches of service, pretty much all of them, until you make, the staff NCO ranks, and like, for example, the Navy, it's not even, E6 until you make E7, you're not making any real decisions. You're just, general population.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah. And I can remember so
the Army, they don't trust their NCOs, staff NCOs for anything. It's like, if they're going to put anybody in charge of anything, it's going to be an officer. You get, I'm having my brain with names. Woods, Corporal Woods, he was,
oh yeah.
he had a whole PB, so
Yeah, and I remember several times that we would be planning patrols and I would say, hey, how about we do this? And you or whoever I was planning with, Gunny Beagle, Staff Sergeant Dix, whoever, would be like, you're an NCO, do it how you want. That's your unit. You figure it out. If you need help, let me know. And again, it forced me to grow, forced me to learn. And that deployment, like, I grew so much in leadership. And then just, I was forced to learn everything and forced into it where I didn't have a choice. So I had to figure it out. And I mean, it's obviously successful and it worked out. But yeah, you guys were big on that. You let the NCOs make their decisions. You let the squad leaders plan the goals, and you would just come out with us and be along for the ride. And
that's it. All right, tell me where
yeah,
you need me. All right.
yeah, which is weird, because through all the training and coming up as PFC Lance Corporal, and you're not allowed to do anything. You do what you're told, and then all of a sudden you pick up Corporal, and it's like, well, how are you going to do this now? And game changer, definitely.
Definitely trust the NCOs,
Heck yeah,
especially good ones.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Well, you guys had a funny way of weeding out the bad ones, so
Mm-hmm. That we did.
absolutely. Well, Sergeant Major, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. It was special to me to hear your side of things and connect with you. And please send those other guys my love and let them know I think about them all the time. And if they want to reach out, definitely give them my number.
We'll do. And you know what? You have my phone number now, so please don't be a stranger. And you know what? I asked for your birthday because this way we may not, talk for the rest of the year, but you can bet your dollar that I will communicate with you at least once a year, and that's going to be on your birthday.
Oh, we'll connect more than that.
All right.
Oh yeah, yeah. I appreciate you, and thank you again for doing this and letting the world see what made me me. So I appreciate you.
And you know what? You see the shirt you're wearing right now?
I did this for you.
All right. Well, I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, you got it.
So that's Lima.
Oh yeah, yeah. I got the misfit symbol right here.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And
Well, I'm glad.
each so there's the Lima company, the Ace. Inside the Ace, it says Lima 8 or L8. And then,
Oh yeah.
there's Lima 7, Lima 1, Lima 2, Lima 3, because, like I said, we communicate, daily. So those are the four, points on around the Ace.
Well, that's crazy. You've been all through the Marine Corps, and Lima Company made an impact on you like that enough to where
Yeah. Yeah.
you got it
Yeah.
tattooed on you. That's good to know. Good to know we did that to you.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Well, thank you again, Sergeant Major, and we'll be in touch, sir.
All right. And do me a favor. Once we sign off here, you can start with the Sergeant Major. You can call me Pascal, all right?
I don't know if I can do that. I
Well,
kept having to
I,
like
I,
tell
I hope you
myself.
grow into it.
I kept having to tell myself, don't call him first sergeant. Don't call him first sergeant because it's
I
burned in
didn't
my
know if
brain.
it's not been started to, I would have been like, okay, well, I was his first sergeant, so it is what it is. Yeah. Again, it doesn't make me.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's hard to break.
All right.
All right, sir.
Yeah, have a good night. Thank you.